What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Bronx Pinstripes Show. This is a special episode. We're talking about the Derek Jeter documentary and not the doubleheader debacle yesterday, which I'm very happy about because I do not want to talk about that. I want to talk about the 2 hours of Yankees pornography that I have just watched. Scott, what's going on?
Yes, well, we will get to the actual baseball on Monday, but you know what? We're gonna live in a fantasy world right now. We're gonna go reminisce.
It's not even fantasy world. It's just the past. We're living in the past for the next hour.
Yeah, not the recent past, the much more distant past when everything was great. Yeah, so we're talking about the captain. First of all, I think broad strokes here. I was very excited for this. Very excited for this. As if I'm sure everybody listening to this was also very excited for this. And so far it hasn't disappointed me. I think it's been well done. I like a lot of the choices that have been made. I was the one wary piece for me that I was going into this is like, how much of this is going to be stuff that I haven't seen before? Because we've seen so much of the story. Is he actually going to open up? Is he going to talk? Is he going to give us a bit more than he has in the past? Because since he's retired, since the Players Tribune first came out, right, that was really like the line in the sand for him. He has been a little bit more forthright. Then he went into Miami Marlins ownership and kind of stepped back again. And so I'm wondering what Jeter are we getting for this documentary? And I was really hopeful that it would be an honest Jeter. And I so far as Derek Jeter goes, I think we've gotten that. I think he's been relatively, I'm not going to say unfiltered, but relatively honest with what he recollects and what his mindset was at the time. So far so good.
Well, so people are comparing this to because ESPN did this with The Last Dance with
Jordan, yeah.
Jordan. And also they did it with Tom Brady. The main difference is that Tom Brady is still an active player. I have not watched the Tom Brady thing.
Nor have I, nor will I.
I can't speak to it. Maybe I'll get around to it one day. But I'm a huge Tom Brady fan. If I haven't watched it by now, probably not going to watch it. The Jordan one I absolutely loved, but also it was treated like the freaking Super Bowl every single night during COVID, so maybe our perceptions were warped. I agree with you. I went into this being like, is this just going to be like a different version of Yankeeography? Because that's the challenge with someone like Derek Jeter and the person that he is. So much of his story has been private, and anything that is public has already been covered ad nauseum in one form or the other, whether it's a book, whether it's Yankeeography, whether it's on the Yes Net, whatever it is. So I agree with you. I was a little is this just going to be repeat for me? I thought episode 1 was really, really good. I loved seeing the footage of him being drafted and him as a kid and talking about his parents and his upbringing and his grandparents. Some of that stuff I already knew, but I feel like they went into a little bit more depth and
a lot more in his
depth,
family and specifically his parents.
And why Derek Jeter is the person that he is, the struggles with racism that their family faced, and how that prepared him. I think Buck Showalter said, this guy has dealt with an interracial family. Nothing is going to be harder than that. Even New York's not going to be harder than that. So that, and I think that was a really great comment by Buck about this guy has been prepared for the challenges of New York. Now, obviously, he could have still been snake bit, right? Darryl Strawberry in episode 2 talked about how he had to sit him down and be like, there's going to be a lot of temptations, all right? I know about those temptations. Don't succumb to it.
Hold on, sit down. I'm going to give you a list.
It will ruin you. And Jeter always put the baseball winning more important than being famous and partying, even though he still did those things. He even said, I had fun. But I don't expect us to actually find out the fun that Derek Jeter had. So he's being honest, but he's not going to empty his closet. That's not going to happen. Ever.
Well, I don't think anybody's I wouldn't empty my closet, and I'm just a dude on the street. Derek Jeter certainly isn't going to empty his closet based on a documentary that is seen by the entire world.
People know, we probably know 80% of the things that we're gonna hear in this documentary already.
But he hasn't really addressed them or spoken about them or talked about the way he thought about those things behind the scenes before. And that's where I don't need him to go into like excruciating detail. One, the production team on this is gonna, I'm sure talk to as many people around that circle and find out the details of it. But again, like we know, like we all know, he kept a very tight circle, and I'm happy Gerald Williams was able to be in this, and unfortunately he has passed, but we were able to get his perspective and his thoughts on at least these 2 episodes. I don't know how, when he passed it in relation to when they were recording this, but they were very tight. Everybody knew that Gerald Williams and Derek Jeter were very tight. So I'm glad he was part of this. I think that's a big deal probably for Derek and the story itself. But something to talk about and why I think some of these choices were made as well. And I'm gonna reach out to him and get him on so we can talk to him directly. But the director of the documentary, Randy Wilkins, he's a Yankees fan. He used to
obviously like that's clear.
But he's not just a regular Yankees fan. Like he used to write for River Avenue Blues. He currently writes for a blog now. He is entrenched in the Yankee fandom and all of the things that we have heard before about Derek Jeter. He's well aware of. So, I have a feeling he was trying to make some of those choices to make it a little bit different, to make it a little bit more intimate so that we're not seeing the same thing. And I'm sure going through this entire process, a lot of that is guarded. And I can imagine how much of it was left on the cutting room floor or it was just off limits, period. But, the family footage, the stuff in the beginning, that's the setup to find out, to really learn more about Derek, the child, Derek, the man and the family, and why he was shaped and how he was shaped. I thought that was super interesting. I did not know a lot of the things about his father, about his mother. Yeah, I didn't realize that they both served together. I didn't realize that they were both military. That makes a lot of sense. Like, there's a lot of things that, like, oh, okay, a lot of these things add up. And I knew that they were a strong family and they were always there, because we would always, growing up, whenever they were always in the stands, it seemed like every game together. They were in the stands because the cameras would find them. So, it was just really cool to see that background and you understand, and I think we all know what kind of a competitor and like a focused human being he is. But man, was he he was focused from the beginning and just like had his eye on the prize the entire time, and made it happen. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, some of the stuff in the first episode where he's talking about his high school days and like Johnny Damon was the top player, and like he was comparing himself, like that was cool. Like I had never heard that before. I didn't know that. Maybe that was public knowledge. It's just, I didn't know it. The stuff about how he fell to the Yankees in the draft, I'm sure a lot of people didn't know, but I knew because I did that history episode a couple years ago about how Derek Jeter fell. And like he could have been a Houston Astro, he could have been a Cincinnati Red, and I find it hilarious that Hal Newhouser, who was the Astros scout at the time, it's like, if I can't convince this team to draft Derek Jeter, then you know what? Screw this. And then he quit. It's like, I've been in baseball my whole life, but these morons won't listen to me. I'm out.
I love the commitment there. I love the conviction. So it's like, you people are so dense and dumb and won't even, because you know what it was. It was they wouldn't entertain the fact that he was a high school kid. And at that point, they're like, experience. Phil
Nevin was a more serious thing. Yeah. But Phil Nevin was a more, at the time, short thing probably that they were thinking a quicker path. Also, they talked about the biases towards cold weather high school players. Mm-hmm. Like, they're not facing the elite competition that they are facing in SoCal and in the South that can play year round. And that's true. It's harder to come out of high school in Kalamazoo, Michigan than it is out of Miami, Florida.
Oh, yeah.
You don't get the same competition.
No, absolutely. And less reps, frankly, because there's snow on the ground.
Unless you're playing travel ball all winter.
Even then.
Which
you're not traveling from Kalamazoo to the southern United States just to get to the warm weather. It's not feasible. It's not practical. Especially then it didn't happen. Maybe now, but then it did not happen.
Now if you've got like a high school phenom who like your parents will probably do that for you.
They moved to Derek
Jeter's parents didn't. No, I know they'd move, but like Derek Jeter's parents weren't. Like, I found it hilarious, kind of relating. Like I could picture I don't know if my dad's probably doesn't even know this documentary is airing, but one
you
point
should tell him he's got to watch this.
No, he doesn't watch TV shows.
Well, this is different. This is, like you said, this is Yankees pornography.
He only watches
pornography
Yankees
with your
baseball.
father.
He watches Yankees baseball, the news, and movies that he's seen 500
Okay,
times.
this is basically that. All of those things combined into one. This is the movie he's seen 100 times. This is news, and this is baseball.
One thing that I saw my parents when Derek Jeter's mom was like, talking about Derek Jeter's dad. He told us we'd be in Kalamazoo for 2 years, and we were there for 20. It's like, yep, that's something my dad would pull.
You could tell she was like, she was bitter about it too. She's like, I wanted to go back to Jersey, because they didn't mention the name of the town that I don't remember, but it was Pequannock. I'm pretty sure is where he's associated. So I don't know if they lived there, if that's where his grandmother lived, or he was born there. I don't remember, but I know Pequannock which is off of like 287 in Jersey. But it was and just to know that I don't remember some of the things too, which I'm sure I knew at one point. But his grandmother being that diehard and the one who got him to Yankee Stadium and all those things.
That was big.
It's just cool. It's so relatable for all of us, because that's exactly what happened. This is exactly, whether you grew up in the New York area or not, he's got that relatability factor as a kid, because he wasn't here either, but he had family here. And I think a lot of Yankees fans and a lot of people who probably listen to the show are transplants. They're not in New York anymore, and they have a tie to New York that is just so strong and can't ever go away because of the family connections and the emotional connections to the team. And he had the same damn thing but he was just really good at baseball. So it's just crazy how things work out.
Do you know what I didn't know? I didn't know his dad was a shortstop. I didn't know his dad played shortstop.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sure that's been covered before, especially, but like I just didn't.
And
know
the competition, competition factor.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
His dad wouldn't let him win.
I'm borrowing some things from this. Like there's some parental lessons in this documentary too. So this is also especially episode 1. It's like how to raise your kid to be Derek Jeter. So Kemp is on his way now.
Did you watch the Tiger Woods documentary on HBO?
Yes, the one where he's talking to the camera, like sitting down in the room, like that one. Not about him, but he was like in it.
No, the one about him.
Yeah, but he was in it too, right? That was the one most recent where he was.
So I watched it when I had COVID in December, so my memory might be a little foggy. The one that completely made his dad out to be a scumbag. My point was the two juxtapositions of Derek Jeter's father and Tiger Woods' father, both raised world-class athletes, but holy shit, was one a bad guy and was one a really good guy.
I mean, say a bad guy, the guy was in a different zone. Take the good guy, bad guy piece out of it, but he was obsessed. He was obsessed with his son's career and with his son's. Yeah. Whereas Jeter's father was obsessively supportive, obsessively supportive in the way.
Raising a good person.
But the morals and ethics, the lessons that were learned are like, you can always do this and you should try as hard as you can. Tiger Woods' dad's like, that 9-iron wasn't 3 inches from the hole. Go do it again 15 more times. So it's just a different obsession and a different type of thing. But if you remember, if you saw in episode 2, they're like, some people, when his sister was talking, some people hang with the right crowd and were surrounded. Some people's circle didn't change, and some people's did. They showed him and Tiger next to each other.
Yeah. That in episode 2, my favorite tidbit from episode 2 was that Jeter was very close to going to that nightclub that Diddy and J-Lo were at that had that shooting. Like, that's a sliding doors moment. If he's there and he's in the tabloids is at a club when there's a shooting with a bunch of celebrities, like, he never was in the tabloids in a negative way. I shouldn't say never, because I wasn't old enough to know it then. I'm sure he was in the tabloids a lot, but
they were always trying. But he was definitely always guarded.
He largely escaped the tabloids of New York City, which is near impossible to do.
When he was talking about the Strawberry mentor, when Strawberry was talking about how that was cool. That is cool. Like, take it from me, kid. Trust me. I was on that 86 team. So was David Cohn. I'm sure David Cohn had a lot of conversations about that too.
David Cohn is probably like,
Straw's probably like, Coney, come over here. Let's talk for a minute. Let's tell this kid how it was and what not to do. So that
Doc Gooden was there
Gooden was
too.
like,
Like
Jesus
Doc
Christ.
Gooden was there in '96.
Yeah. They were
devil,
really trying to
there's
recreate
the devil
something.
on each, devil and the angel on the shoulders. It's like Doc Gooden's on one side, Daryl, who was reformed by that time. Is on the
Let's
other
see
side.
how mentally strong this kid is. They throw Cone, Gooden, Strawberry. I didn't even realize when you think about that with him coming up in like '96. That's kind of crazy. Talk about common sense department a little bit. Maybe we would have gotten that one wrong because probably those guys.
It's like a decade after the
Yeah.
'86 Mets. It's like here's your future,
Yeah.
kid. Which one do you want to do?
That's funny. I forget what my point was here, but you know what I'm very curious about to bring it to today's world. I'm very curious if Jeter and Judge talk behind the scenes. I'm very curious about that, and I have a feeling they do.
Yeah.
I have a suspicion that they do. And I know that that Judge has studied Derek Jeter and seen the things because his mannerisms are very similar. And the way that he talks, even the cadence in the way he talks is very similar. I would not be surprised if there were phone calls happening behind the scenes that you know, we won't probably know about until 30 years later, 20 years later, whenever. But, you know, Jeter being that loyal guy, being that guy that came up in the system and knows this exact deal, definitely recognizes what Judge is. I think he identifies what Judge is and what Judge can be to the team and the city. And I would be very surprised if there wasn't outreach and conversations between the two of them.
Yeah, I guess the difference between the two is that when Jeter came up in '96, he came up into a team with so many veterans who were also leaders in their own right. David Cohen, obviously. Strawberry was a leader. I mean, Strawberry was what he did in that brawl.
I love the breakdown of that brawl too. It was so great, and they got a great shot of a great close-in shot, and I think they did work on that to zoom it in and make it even more crystal clear. Because I've rewound that video 1,000 times, and it's hard to catch that strawberry hook to Benitez's face, and they caught it really well, and it was nice and clear, and it looked awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, and obviously Paul O'Neill, who came over to the team, established himself as a all-star level player and was a leader. So there were so many leaders on that team, and then he was the rookie that came in and ultimately became the captain. Whereas Judge has always been pointed to as the guy, basically since we realized in 2017 he was having a great season. So I think it's slightly different. One, it's like, it happened, Jeter took it, and the other people are trying to give it to Judge.
I mean, that's just social media fandom telling people to do it.
Sure, it is. That didn't exist in '96.
But a lot of the papers were writing about those things. I don't remember the exact narrative and the tone for people.
I don't know. I can't say.
I don't think anybody's giving it to Judge right now. I think Judge is certainly playing it back and developing him. I mean, we've talked about this. We've seen him develop. I don't want to talk about Judge right now, but we've seen him develop into a different guy. It just wouldn't surprise me. That's all I really wanted to note about that. But
maybe Jeter, now that since he quit the Marlins, I mean, he's in Subway commercials and all these different. Every time I'm watching MLB TV, he's on a new commercial, and so he's certainly more.
Well, he's
public,
also
not just for this documentary.
I think one of the bigger things for him is that he did grow up in this type of household that was very supportive. He grew up in the Yankee locker room in a winning atmosphere, and now he's a father himself. So there's this evolution of Derek Jeter who now once you become a father, like, perspective changes, things change, and you want to give a lot back to people. I think it's like that natural tendency to support even more because it's no longer about you. You are now on the back burner compared to the other people in your family, and I think that rolls over into relationships, into the way that you mentor people, and I think that's just like an interesting factor. And I would love to know, and I would love to be a fly on the wall for some of those conversations, but wouldn't surprise me. The whole piece of the other. Oh yeah, what I was gonna say, the leadership. How about the moment where they talked about when that ball fell in left field between Ricky Leday and Chad Curtis and Derek Jeter,
Yeah.
and Wells does the what are we doing, hands up, and Jeter goes immediately and nips that right in the bud and was like, nah, big man, we don't do that. We don't do that here. And I love the fact when Buster Olney came up the next day to talk to Jeter about that, Jeter goes like this. He goes, you, pulls in the entire infield to talk to Buster Olney. And I'm sure this was talked about in the in the clubhouse. You know, this was preempt. They were like, the things stay here. The things stay in here. Because I wouldn't be surprised if Wells said something to him in the clubhouse that we'll never know about. But they all just verified the story. And when you have all of the people that are in the circle on the field verify the story or squash the story, Only's got nowhere to go. He can't write about it because it was denied by everybody there. So I just thought it was really interesting in how the limits that he went to make sure that all of that business on the inside was kept on the inside. And that goes for clubhouse, dugout, clubhouse, off the field, all the things. It was so protected. It was so protected. And he had a ring of guys protecting it with him. It wasn't just him. They all knew that they needed to protect the team and Derek Jeter. And I think that's fascinating.
That's why I'm excited for when the documentary gets to when A-Rod.
Yeah, well, it's already leading into
because they touched on it with the SI stuff, but that's actually what they said was that A-Rod was the person back on the initial cover when Jeter had him in the little headlock. That A-Rod was like, I'm done with this. Every time I do something with Jeter, it's Jeter's number one and I'm number two. Look at my numbers. So A-Rod obviously was jealous of Jeter and wanted to distance himself from that. I thought so. I didn't know it dated back that far. I thought the rift happened when A-Rod went to become a free agent and started talking about basically bad-mouthing Jeter through his free agency tour, being like, well, he hits number two in a great lineup. That's easier to do than what I've done. But I guess it dates back to a few years before that when A-Rod, I think, started to – it's all from jealousy. He denies it, but it's all from jealousy.
There's no doubt when he sees someone who they came up together, it was a little bit of a different – but also Jeter definitely was like – because he was that a year or two older and he got up there a little early because A-Rod was still playing in high school – a little big brother tendency though too. A little big brother tendency.
But A-Rod made it to the majors the same time.
But in spring training when he was there, he was up with the club while A-Rod was still in high school. That's why they initially connected because he was in Miami and Jeter was in Tampa. So he was down there with the club. So there's that little bit of a big brother syndrome, and you always want to take down that guy, but you also respect and look up to him. But at that age, you're invincible, 18, 19, 20, 22 years old. Like, you don't think like that necessarily. You're thinking, but Jeter was just so much more mature than a lot of people at that point because of his upbringing and because of the way that he acted. He was able to handle it. But even in the little interviews and when they're on the field going back and forth, like you can tell there's like a little condescending tone from the way that Jeter talks and in the confidence that he talks about A-Rod, like he is a little brother and that he knows that he'll always be that like strong hand, always, because A-Rod has this little emotional disconnect. And I guarantee you, cousin Yuri's like, yo, why is this kid like act like why is this kid act like he's everything? Your numbers are so much better. He just got everything and handed to him on a silver platter. Why there were people in his ear doing that, and he's so receptive to it in a negative way. Like he's way too amenable to be persuaded by his inner circle, and that was a huge difference, I think.
I'm taking a little bit of a leap here with this character analysis, but I think what it comes down to at that point, right, like call 95, 96, that era, Jeter was confident in himself. He was happy with himself, whereas A-Rod wasn't. And I don't know, maybe A-Rod thought he needed to accomplish more and always accomplish more, and he wasn't getting the recognition for it, whereas Jeter was winning the Rookie of the Year, was winning the World Series, was playing for the Yankees. So Jeter had more internal satisfaction, I think, at that time than A-Rod did. That's kind of the leap.
It's not a leap. That is still the case today. There's always an insecurity in A-Rod where he's trying to prove it. That's why he took steroids. That's why he listens to the people around him because they're chirping. He believes the things that he hears because he's not and hasn't been totally secure in his place and what he does. And his actions and the things that his decisions have really shown that exact thing. Derek Jeter stayed the course, stayed disciplined and true to his craft and did things a certain way. And A-Rod did things a different way and was much more public about things and had, relationships that were out in the open and talking about, like, there was just a lot of things that were, I mean, they went like this. They went like in that rookie year, even, like, you could see them doing this, and then it just spiraled. And I think A-Rod was like, I got to get back there. And that took a hold of him. So I think he's always been insecure.
I would like to, I can't imagine how A-Rod would have reacted to making 56 errors in A-ball. Like, can you imagine how he would have crumbled internally and potentially just derailed as a human if he struggled that badly in the minor leagues, like Derek Jeter struggled so badly when he was first drafted? I mean, he was, this again, not new news. We've heard about this before, but he was awful, overmatched, and he had to prove it to himself that he could play baseball and was worthy of being a first round draft.
I think there was always that chip on his shoulder. It's always been there ever since. I mean, he talked about it in the in episode 1 about his upbringing. Like, people looked at them a different way in a place, and that created this caution. And he kind of supported it in episode 2, talking about when he meets a new person, he's like, all right, what's the angle? What's the deal here? Like, why are you talking to me? What's the angle? And he would put his guard up to find that out. And all of this makes sense. All of this makes sense because he was brought up in a certain way, where he even mentioned this in episode 1, where he's talking about the where they would go out in public. And he's like, I was aware of everything because I would notice when people were looking at us. I would always notice when people were looking. He's so perceptive and aware of his surroundings, even from a young child, and I'm sure that was one of the reasons why, and so detail-oriented about those little things, like identifying what's happening in his peripherals because people are staring in a certain way. That just continued throughout. Like, it's a common theme. And A-Rod, who had all the talent in the world,
he'd get duped by.
But he also had all the talent in the world
of him getting inside his head.
He didn't have to. I don't want to say try as hard, but he was naturally more gifted. And like you said, growing up in Miami, he was always playing baseball too. So people were always like, Alex, what do you need? Alex, what is this? Alex, what do you need? Whereas Jeter was like fighting for it and clawing for it and standing in his living room waiting for a phone call,
Jeter grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where baseball was not life. And yes, he was the best high school player, but there were scouts that would ignore him because he played in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And then there were people in that town who would have racial biases against him because he's part of an interracial family. Like, way different than with what A-Rod dealt with as a 14-year-old. And so, yeah, all of that stuff sort of building to how Jeter was able to handle New York, I thought was super interesting and some new information that I definitely
real quick on that. One thing that I mean, this is probably the same point, but just to hammer it home, I think all of that adversity shaped exactly who he is. The adversity and the way that it was communicated from his parents to him. And I don't know, I don't remember if I ever knew this, but I didn't connect it, and it felt like new information to me. But I did not know that they were a military family, or his father and his mother. I don't remember that I knew that if I did know it, but that discipline coming from a military, I'm not saying it was a military upbringing, but military influence, on the parents, very regimented, very disciplined in their own right. It checks so many boxes, and it makes so much sense to the way that he.
I mean, his childhood friend talked about how they had the setup in his garage, and he would have to take all of his swings, and if he wasn't done with his reps, he couldn't hang out, basically. Like, he wouldn't. It's not that he couldn't hang out; it's that Jeter himself would not allow himself to go hang out with friends until his work.
Internally obsessed, also, and that was just a character trait that was passed down, and that's interesting.
And I think the moment that I have never related to Derek Jeter most is when he said, "I'm a big I told you so person."
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up.
and I'm like, obviously, like, I knew that about him.
But he said it.
But damn, is that so accurate? And I'm a huge I told you so person too. Obviously, never to the level that Derek Jeter is proving people wrong, being the shortstop.
Many battles, baby, many battles.
It could be little. It could be little. It's usually little for me. It's like, no, that's not going to fit through that door. Told you so. So it's whatever it is. I'm a big I told you so person. So I've never been able to relate to Derek Jeter in my life until that very moment.
But that's not true, because internally you have related to him because of the things that he did. That's the thing. I know, but it's
kidding.
Yeah. When he said that, when he's like, first of all, I'm just so happy that he said it and was like looking dead. I mean, he was looking dead ass into the camera and said that as serious you could possibly be, because it's true. And, you know, even acknowledging that maybe it's not the greatest thing in the world, but that's how I'm wired. That's how it is. I am here to prove you wrong. Like, I dare you to say I can't do it. That was one of the things that was it.
That's a common thread in all
true.
super athletes, though. Jordan had the same thing. Tom Brady has this. Like, all super athletes who get to levels that none of us can imagine and win, it's not just perform well, right? Like, I don't think A-Rod has that. A-Rod's career numbers better than Jeter's career numbers. But Derek Jeter didn't care about his career numbers. He just wanted to win every year and tell you so. See, I have the ring.
Yeah.
Fuck you. You don't.
Well,
that's what he cared
so
about.
Going to episode 2, talking specifically about the doc as well and what happened in the 1996 when they went to Atlanta down 2-0, they had to muster that feeling like, okay, we're disrespected.
Yeah. Cone said that, right? He's like, "What?
Yeah,
we
resentment.
Gotta find
we're going to find something to fuel us."
Your
And
opponent.
nobody thinks we'll be here. Everybody's disrespectful towards us. There's nobody believes that we could do any of this. Let's go out and prove everybody wrong. Like a big fuck you. Let's go. Like, you don't think we're going to be here, so we're going to bottle that up and use it. And that's a condensed version of what individually I think a lot, like you just mentioned, a lot of professional athletes, but that's that same mentality. They just did it collectively, and then it fuels, like, you get momentum internally because you're looking at the next guy and you know that guy's like F you and that guy's like F you. So everybody's trying to stick it to the people around them who are talking, and they're just going to take it out on the people on the other side of the diamond between the lines. And it was beautiful.
So the one thing about episode 2 that I loved episode 2, not as much as episode 1, but the reason I loved episode 1 more is because I felt like we got more Jeter stuff, inside Jeter stuff, than in episode 2. Episode 2, like, you have to tell the story of it picked up after the 95 loss. You have to tell the story of the 96 season and them winning as a team in 96, becoming the best team ever in 98. Like, you can't tell the Jeter story without those. But there was like a 20-minute span where I was like, this is just a Yankees documentary, not a Derek Jeter documentary, which is fine. But they did touch on Jeter's impact in that playoffs. Obviously, the Jeffrey Mayer thing. He's said this joke before. Got to jump. Tony Tarasco didn't jump. You know, all that's good. That's always fun to hear him say that. But it got to a point where it's like, okay, well, could you have found something in that 96 playoffs, in that World Series, or something that Jeter did? Like, I don't know, maybe there just wasn't anything, and you still have to tell the story of the Yankees winning, and then how he handled the winning and becoming so instantly famous overnight, going on late night talk shows. You know, Diddy wants to hang out with you. It's like, you don't get that if you're not World Series champion.
Correct, because in New York, everything is winning. I mean, you could still be a megastar without winning, but that winning piece makes you royalty. Like, you are then crowned in the city of New York, which you don't get bigger than that. That's it. That you don't get bigger than that. So, yeah. But you know, looking at the thing too, when you're looking at Derek Jeter throughout these playing years, and you get beyond the setup of who the person is and all these things. I mean, frankly, there was a lot of, as mentioned, he took small bites of the apple. Not a big Tiger Woods bite. A small bite.
That was a
of
great
the apple.
analogy.
And because of that, there's not a lot there, because he was so focused on his job and executing his job at a high level. He would go to sleep early on some days when people would go out. He would do the boring thing. And that was part of his makeup, because he knew that he could never let any of those things distract him from his purpose. And his purpose was to win championships for the New York Yankees. That's it. Number one, no questions asked. You can't put anything else there. That was the only thing. And when I hear that, and I don't know how that makes other people feel that are not Yankees fans, and I don't even know how many people that are not that are watching this are not Yankees fans I hope they are, and they can get this appreciation, because it's so, I mean, when you see someone at that level, there's so many opportunities to be a celebrity and to be famous and to take it all in and to dip into those waters and to really take advantage of that. 8 out of 10 people would have done that because of the difference. But the difference between this kid and everybody else is he had one thing on his mind, and only one thing. And you could not derail him from that. And that is fascinating because of the amount of pressure and just shiny objects that were thrown at him on a daily basis.
And it goes back to his family, because right in the little teaser of episode 2 before the intro, Jeter's sister said that her dad would always tell Jeter, if your head gets too big to walk through the door, then you're not welcome here anymore. And Jeter respected his family so much that he knew, if I'm not welcome in my family, then what am I here for? So he never let his head get too big because of that reason, because his dad and mom would not allow his head to get too big.
There are a lot of parallels, I think, to Derek Jeter's story and Tom Brady's story. And when you look back, I mean, even going back to the Michigan ties, the parental influence. I mean, you look at Brady's career; his parents were always up in the stands, in the box, watching him play. He always talked to them. He always said, "Hi, Mom," in the press. He always took a step back and never got into any of the off-field stuff. Like he was also obsessively laser focused on one thing, like Derek Jeter was, and neither one of them had all of the natural talent and abilities as some of the other like specimen athletes. They didn't have it. They had to work their ass off to get to that point. Obviously, they had enough to get to a certain level, but then the work could never stop. If they stopped working, they would have taken a step back. If they let themselves fall a little bit, they would have taken a step back, and they wouldn't allow that to happen. And I think it's an interesting, fascinating parallel between the two of their lives. And then Jeter moved into his house. Yeah, I know
a big thing with Tom Brady, Brady always used being drafted in the 6th round as the chip on his shoulder, had to prove people wrong, whereas Jeter was a first-round draft pick. But then so he had to, the chip was more not that people didn't believe in you, because if you're drafted in the first round, you're believed in, okay? So there's got to be something a little bit more I don't want to say manufactured. Really what's come across to me is Jeter had to prove it to himself. Now, obviously Tom Brady did as well, but Jeter had to prove to himself he could be the starting shortstop for the Yankees before he could prove to
I disagree with that completely. No, because I think that...
You don't think so? He felt defeated. He was making 56
for sure. Okay, so in that moment,
errors,
he had to pick himself back up, no doubt. But if anybody, there's nobody more confident in Derek Jeter than Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter knew. He had a moment of doubt there, as everybody does, as any athlete, any successful person in the world has that moment of reflection and failure where you learn from it, and either you pick it back up and you move forward and you take those lessons and you spin them into something positive, or you crumble. And you see a lot of people crumble, and we don't know about those people. It happens all the time. But even in when you're drafted number 1, the only, like, I hear you when you're saying that one was a first round draft pick, one was a, what was he, 7th round, 6th round, and but it's baseball. It's also different. You're in football, whether you're a 6th round draft pick or you're a 2nd round draft pick, or you start with the pros. You don't have to work your way up. Whereas Jeter, you start in single A ball in Timbuktu, middle of nowhere, and you're all by yourself in a small ass town riding buses, crying to your parents because you're like, what the hell did I just do? So, baseball is different. Even when you're a first rounder, you're not really like that guy until you have proven it for 3 years. It's such a different path. But the fuel and the fire between those guys is great. And the self-confidence, like the no doubt I have confidence, chip on the shoulder, still have to prove it, but still very confident in my own abilities and that I will prove it. I think that's a really, really strong common thread.
There's a lot of other stuff I want to touch on from this that the documentary at least pointed to as building blocks for Derek Jeter, right? Like obviously George Steinbrenner and not only Jeter's relationship with Steinbrenner, but when Steinbrenner was banned from baseball for his dealings with Howard Spiro, whatever his name is, for trying to dig up dirt on Winfield, who Jeter was a Winfield guy. Another cool story was that him and his father met Winfield one time.
Where was that picture? Why didn't we have that picture?
Then obviously Jeter is like,
the extension of Winfield and Jeter.
Well, I don't think it was. I think it was in passing. But Jeter was like, I didn't ask about the details between Steinbrenner and Winfield. I didn't want to know because it would he would have a warped perception, or it would.
From what he says, he still doesn't. From what he says, if you take it his word on this, he still hasn't asked, still doesn't know,
right,
and doesn't want to know because he doesn't want that to be tainted. And
so obviously, Gene Michael taking over the reins allowed and this is not new, allowed the Yankees farm system to develop and produce all of the young minor leaguers. Jeter meeting Pettit and getting big leagued in single A ball was a cool story. I know Jeter and Mariano, they were called up around the same time in '95. They both struggled, and I know they were pretty close because they were riding the shuttle, which was down to Columbus at that time. Van. So, but like the moments of like Mariano almost being traded for
Felix Vermont,
I forget the guy's name from Seattle, the shorts, to Seattle because they didn't
what a
trust
disaster
that Jeter could handle the job, and then my God, like just unbelievable
to Seattle,
if
Seattle no less, who just knocked your ass
cool
out
moments there
in a highly emotional piece. Yeah,
would have been. I mean, Tino had just come over from Seattle, so it would have been a lot of exchanging of players. So it was really cool to see that, and then into the little jab he gave George at the ESPYs about arbitration and like teams fighting with players through arbitration. Nothing new there. Trying to diminish your actual accomplishments in arbitration, and. Did you get the sense that I don't know? I got a little bit of the sense that Brian Cashman and Derek Jeter do not have a good relationship, just from the way that Cashman was talking about Jeter, and Jeter was talking about the Yankees front office. Cashman basically sounds like he's reading a script and reciting something he rehearsed every time he talks about Derek Jeter.
So I think there's an interesting dynamic between the two because when Cashman got the reins, I mean, he was talking about this. He didn't want that because he knew that was his probably fastest. No, but that's also what?
I don't buy that.
I do because when you are in that position. No. Let me tell you why.
You don't want the general manager job of New York.
The reason why, in that moment, as he's ascending and coming up from his career, obviously the goal is to work in the front office and to be, to continue to progress in the Yankees. But under Steinbrenner, your fastest way out of the organization was to be that guy. Yeah,
sure.
Yes, that was the fastest way out of the organization. So if you could, lie in the weeds for a little while and establish yourself and get a better reputation and a better tie, then you probably have a better chance of sticking long term. And I could totally understand that a young guy in his career coming up with this with a ton of pressure, with George Steinbrenner as the owner, with the volatile nature of those relationships, as you know. But still there, damn well what he is. And Cashman coming up as an intern through there. He knew the skeletons in the closet. He knew what the temper was and how people got axed in a heartbeat. So, there was writing on the wall for him to be a scapegoat. Also, I think if that season if the '98 season didn't work the way it did, a lot of things could have happened that way in the run. Clueless Joe. What happens if they don't win? What happens if they don't even make? Just put in a world where they win all those games and then they get outed by Cleveland, or they don't win as many games as they did.
You're right.
Joe would have been a scapegoat because damn well Steinbrenner would have been like, yeah, I have to change this right now because everybody says I told you so to me because of Joe Torre. Brian Cashman doesn't have the
the biggest I told you so guy of all time.
George Steinbrenner is also trying to avoid the I told you so's as much as humanly possible too. And then you put not a kid, but Brian Cashman, a young guy coming up in this, you have two people, one that has failed publicly in every spot he's been in, Joe Torre, and then Brian Cashman, who has no experience in that position. And you're doing that. Those were ballsy, controversial decisions to do that if you look back. And if it didn't work out the way that they worked, both of those guys would have been gone after 98. I guarantee you.
I don't know. It's tough to say. It's tough to say because by 98, Torre had already won a championship and then maybe won the most. Even if you lose to Cleveland in what looked like they were going to lose, where they got that Knobloch play and it's kind of a messy loss, and then say you had went to Cleveland and El Duque
just say they lost that. Yeah, they lost that series.
Like
both those guys are on
always was. Then potentially, yeah. So, but getting back to my point about, I think there's still some bad blood between Cashman and Jeter from how contract negotiations went, not only in arbitration in the beginning, but also the last Jeter contract where Brian Cashman basically tried to get him to move off of shortstop. Because another thing that Derek Jeter said in this documentary, which he said a billion times, is one of the things I'm most proud about is shortstop is the only position I
didn't make that move when everybody said to go to third base. Fuck you, Alex Rodriguez. I'm not moving out of my position. No, that's true. I totally didn't bring it back to my point about Cashman and Jeter either. But what I was going to say is that Cashman was put in that position after Jeter had arrived for 2 years. So I think that level of like Jeter thinking that guy's his boss was a little different because he wasn't like the guy, you know what I mean? He was actually still trying to prove himself at the same time. And I think that because of that dynamic, it can certainly affect a relationship, especially because Jeter already had a ring and Cashman wasn't the GM when he came in. I mean, he was a guy that was working for the GM and he was probably catering to Derek Jeter because he was the guy after 96. So that power dynamic wasn't established from the beginning. Whereas all those other people, there was a clear power dynamic and everybody knew Jeter knew his spot there. But with Cashman, it's a little bit of a different, ascension and dynamic between the two of them, because is he really my superior? Because I don't feel like he is. So it's probably hard for Cashman too.
Well, I think they'll get into, I think, a little bit more of
because
the
there was,
Jeter,
I mean, it definitely got more
the end of
contentious.
I would have to imagine. There was a dinner. I forget where I read this. There was a dinner Brian Cashman had with Derek Jeter where he sat him down and tried to convince him to move shortstop, and Derek Jeter told him to go fuck himself.
And exactly that. But I think that goes back to it. Do you think that if things worked out differently, and it was just maybe it was Gene Michael who was back in that spot. He's the GM. Let's just for conversation's sake. And I know it was Bob Watson, but Bob Watson wasn't there for very long. So that's why I'm saying stick Michael. Just go with me for this. If it were Stick Michael, who were the GM, and he sat down Jeter in that moment and had that conversation with Stick Michael's, resume and all those things, it would have been a different conversation. Maybe he wouldn't have done it, but it would have been a different conversation.
No, it wouldn't have.
Yeah,
he probably wouldn't have told him to go fuck himself.
Stick Michael
but
carried a lot bigger weight with his opinion, I think, and he carried a bigger stick.
He carried a bigger stick. So one other thing I want to mention, and then you can mention your final thoughts. So, they showed the rowdy video footage of fans outside Yankee Stadium in the 96 playoffs waiting for World Series tickets. I was looking for you.
So I haven't told that story in such a long time, but I was online in 96. I remember getting to the stadium at we got there at like midnight. We went in with my buddy Paul Genovese and his father. Took us into the stadium, and that was when the practice field outside the stadium, they had barricades in that field lining up, and it would loop around like multiple times. So you're standing next to people, you have to go all the way around that entire goddamn field, and then it would loop around the stadium. I think once or twice. It was crazy. And then at one point at like 3 or 4 in the morning, there was like a riot, and people just like bum rushed towards the front of it. I mean, there were cops with nightsticks like knocking people down who were trying to get in front of line. It was wild. And I ended up at the stadium, around the stadium on there, online, right next to the stadium. So I definitely jumped the line at some point. I don't remember like all the small details there. Like this was, you had to wait online to get the tickets for the World Series. And I was on River Ave. I could see the ticket, the box office where we had to go. and someone came out and was like, that's it, no more tickets. And I was fucking crushed because there were no more tickets and I couldn't get them. And, you know, you can't go on Ticketmaster and get tickets the same way like you did then. You had to physically know someone or go scalp them in person. And it was just a different animal. So, but yeah, it was crazy things.
I was watching this morning. I had it on the TV as Harrison was running around and throwing Cheerios everywhere, and that part came out. I was like, Leanne, make sure you look for Scott because he was in that crowd. And she was like, "What are you talking about? That was so long ago." I was like, he was there,
freshman in high school. But no, that was crazy, man. I don't remember if
Anything
I said
else
this.
You want to touch on?
I don't remember if I said this in the beginning.
I mean, there's so many great
the obvious ties to New York, the mid '90s, right there, and the hip hop were very apparent. The music, obviously, the parallels with Puff and like all the guys that were big on the scene. Jadakiss was talking about it. There were just a lot of guys there, but the music choices, I got cap tip to Randy on the music choices in there because they were awesome. And even the it was different. It wasn't just hip hop. There was some classic rock laced in there too, with going through and watching those highlights. So I thought it was really well done. I really enjoy all of the stylistic choices of it too. And there's definitely some like home footage too that you could tell. So I appreciate, and I could see the fan's eye looking at this stuff and trying to go for that extra little thing to bring you closer to the experience. So I have a deep appreciation for all of that. Yeah, it honestly just made me sad too. Because the whole Mattingly narrative in this is just, it's so. No, the narrative of Mattingly. No narrative.
What do you mean?
Leaving when all of this is starting to happen. It's just, it's sad. It breaks my heart a little bit.
Yeah.
And he knew it. He knew that he had to retire. But that 95 series still, like, I can't. It's hard for me to watch that game with Griffey, sliding home.
Oh, Griffey hugging A-Rod hugging Griffey. Like, I actually, like, again, 95 was like right before. Like, I was 7 in 95, so I don't know. I'm sure I was there watching with my dad, but really, it's like it's not gonna hit emotionally like it hits for you. But seeing freaking joyous A-Rod.
But think about that now too. I was and also Wally Matthews being in here, I thought was a great choice. Unless you're a Yankees fan and you're in New York, you're not bringing Wally Matthews into here. And Wally Matthews is very unfiltered. We'll just say whatever the fuck he wants to say. Yeah, he's
Wally's been on our show before.
Fantastic. So I'm glad that he was in here too, because he's definitely like a very true unfiltered voice that was writing for the Post, I think, for a while. And so think about that dynamic in 95, A-Rod beating Jeter, who was on the team, but he wasn't playing, but he's
true.
How arrogant and cocky
in the dugout.
It was A-Rod after that, and then Jeter comes and wins it. And now I'm thinking about that on the field interview with the condescending tone, and I get it even more now because Jeter's like, oh yeah, 95 was cute. That was adorable. Did you have fun there? Did you enjoy that? Never again will you feel that, and I will let you know how it feels to be a winner and to be successful, but I'm going to do it in my own way. And it's going to be the big brother condescending piece of this that it will bother you a little bit. It will twist the knife a little bit, and you'll know it. I'll know it, but nobody else will know it. And I love that.
The thing is, A-Rod can never even say to Jeter that we beat you because they didn't beat Jeter. But in that moment, on the field. Yes, they beat the Yankees.
In that
Jeter
moment,
was in the
that's
dugout,
not there.
But he wasn't on the field.
You're on that team. You're on this team.
But anytime, fast forward to 1998 and Derek Jeter has a World Series.
Jeter ended it in 96.
I mean, A-Rod, if Jeter... No, I know that, but if for whatever friendly rivalry or serious rivalry between the two, A-Rod can never say we beat you to Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter can always say,
sure.
I've won. A-Rod never beat Derek Jeter.
Correct.
He beat the Yankees once,
I guarantee
but never beat Derek Jeter.
A-Rod laid into that win in 95 as if it was the two of them going head to head. But
Okay,
Jeter
fine.
used
Jeter
it.
can say
Jeter
I
just,
wasn't
like,
on, I
took it
wasn't playing,
probably and
dude.
used
So if
it,
I were playing, it would
and
have been
then-
different.
And then created a dynasty off that hatred and that spite and the biggest "I told you so" moment. Hey, I told you
Spite's
so.
Powerful, man.
He's just looking at
spite.
A-Rod.
You can build dynasties on
championship.
spite.
There's a ring. There's a ring. There's a ring. You want to come over and try to get a ring with me, Alex? I'll let you come over, but you're playing a different position. It's just such a power. He always had the upper hand in every situation and still does today. It's.
I bet you cannot find a single championship in any sport in any year without some spite.
Spite's a hell of a
Always
drug.
a little bit of spite sprinkled in. So we're gonna be recapping the all of the episodes. The schedule is that they are airing 2 episodes every Thursday, and then the last single episode on August 11th. We're gonna try and publish these every Friday. Might be delayed a couple times based on schedules, but hope everyone's watching along with us and enjoying it. I know I certainly am. It was again, to reiterate, it was a nice break from
God
the
damn it.
Yankees once again
Why'd you
not
have to
being
bring
able
that
to
up?
beat the Astros.
No, we'll talk
Anything
about
else?
that.
Anything else you want to talk
First
about?
of all, I also, whatever. We'll talk about that on Monday. No, I'm looking forward to these. This is candy. This is candy. So I hope everybody enjoys it and share it with people that are not Yankees fans because they need to learn. They need to learn some appreciation. Teach them.
All right, we'll be back at you again on Monday.